New England take.
How much should we spend on K through 12 education? It's been one of the biggest hot-button issues here in Concord, as well as Washington, D.C., with the Department of Education possibly going away at some point in the future. We'll see if that actually happens or not. But either way, should we be spending $15,000, $17,000, $23,000, or $44,000? This is a legitimate issue, a legitimate question. It was shocking to me to see so many towns recently have proposed caps on increases in education spending and things of that nature and have them all shot down when you're seeing huge increases over the last few years. This is going to be episode 1 of a series of videos I'm going to be doing. You see so many people out there reporting on education funding, but only at the macro level, only at the per student or per school district level, when that doesn't really represent why the numbers are changing. For example, according to the National Center for Education Statistics, Pittsburgh has the highest cost, Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, at $44,484 per student. Why? This is something that we only hear the crazy headlines over. We hear it's gone up this much over so many years. This is crazy. Why are we doing this? Get rid of all public education. Go entirely to a education choice model. Education freedom accounts are the only answer to this. I want to figure out over the course of this series why it is getting to this point. And later on in this video, I'm going to have a little more, I will have a couple of things that definitely lead into a good part of what's going on with it. But the economics of public education obviously have a systemic issue that is not being addressed or is being glossed over when it comes to lawmakers, when it comes to the president, when it comes to people at your local school board. I mean, should teachers be making $30,000 a year? Should they be making as much as the superintendents at well north of $100,000 a year? I mean, you can see superintendent income here in the state can be anywhere from $100,000 to $190,000. Concord School District here, it's about $190,000 a year that she makes. How much of an impact does this have on the bottom line? I don't know. I mean, this is something that's very time-intensive to be able to understand. But the New Hampshire Department of Education did have a press release go out January 15th, 2025, titled "New Hampshire's Cost Per Pupil Continues the Upward Trend," showing just the broad range of cost structures that you're seeing, whether it seems like for the most part it's either going from $21,000 as the statewide average operating cost per pupil, but once again, Pittsburgh is sitting at $44,000. Part of that has to be it's a rural community. The economics of it are very difficult when you're getting in some situations like that. We're kind of glossing over the nuance of educating in a rural community and providing as close to the same resources as you can to the more urban-oriented communities here in the state. The NH Journal, Michael Graham, had a pretty good analysis of what's going on with the Portsmouth spending and how it can lead to people really having their eyes open to why is this costing so much. But once again, we're not really getting specifics. Is it because we want to be able to offer more job-focused education? Is it because we want to make sure we have the latest technology so students aren't being left behind from that perspective? I don't know. Instead, the argument primarily, at least anecdotally, what I'm seeing so much of is the desire to not cut teachers, not to cut support staff and things like that, even though we're seeing dwindling enrollments. We saw this also at the federal government level with DOGE going through and doing all the craziness. It doesn't matter your opinion on it in this situation, but ultimately, in my opinion, if you work for a government agency, you should have the same kind of situation as if you're at a private industry. It's not a permanent job forever. I don't care how dedicated you are to whatever agency, school district, or anything of that nature. You're at the mercy of whether the taxpayers are willing to fund your position anymore. And we're having that same situation here in Portsmouth specifically, where they're saying we're tightening our belts, but we're still increasing They're still increasing the budget by a fair amount. For example, here we're seeing in 2019 enrollment slipped to 2,676 students, but taxpayers spent $10 million more on education. And according to the New Hampshire Department of Education, by 2024, Portsmouth's enrollment went down to 2,428, while the per pupil spending had surged to 25,488. The economics of this does not make sense. I'm genuinely curious personally how much this has to do with superintendent's offices expanding, needing in order, and then being able to properly staff those aspects of the school districts is very expensive because you got to get people with management experience that were either principals or management at other sort of school districts of varying sizes. So that gets expensive, but is it worthwhile? I honestly don't know. I have my doubts. I sincerely believe that it does not make sense. Once again, the Department of Education had a cost per pupil graph that they've published where it shows it's just going up, where it's cost per pupil change. It's gone from under $15,000 to well north of $20,000. This doesn't make sense, and taxpayers are kind of having enough of it. There's a reason why in Concord at the Statehouse they've divided how they're talking about education, where they've completely removed the school funding side of it from the curriculum and everything else side of it, because it really needs a focus, and it takes a lot of data dorks to really look into what's going on. And at the federal level, we're literally seeing the desire of so many people in Congress, the executive branch, with the desire to kill the Department of Education, because adding more bureaucracy is not helping. The Department of Education has greatly expanded over the last 30-something years that they've been around, actually more than 40-something years, I think, and it has not helped increase scores. So scores are basically staying the same, if not getting worse. The ability of students to be able to read at a grade at their proper grade level is all over the place. New Hampshire's pretty good. I mean, that's one thing where you can say when you look at, we're in the top 15%, 10%, somewhere in that ball, 10 to 15% nationwide when it comes to standardized test scores and such. But if you're spending $25,000 a year, you'd hope it'd be even better than that, honestly, because you see schools where they're spending even less, where the scores are the same. You see at charter schools here in New Hampshire, it literally costs $10,000 less per student, and basically every charter school I've seen, it's between $10,000 and $15,000 a year for those students. How is it that they're able to provide basically the same level of education? In my opinion, personally, anecdotally, it is a tremendously more effective education system that they've got at a lot of the charter schools than the public schools, than even the expensive public schools. I may dive into specifically what I've seen anecdotally, once again, with the Concord School District, and I've had some issues with it. I have had the superintendent of the Concord School District on a couple times, but things are not sunshine and happiness here. Like, there are issues. And one specific part of the equation for school funding is definitely special education. It is huge. This is the New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project. They're a left-wing organization that just wants more and more money going to the schools. I think ultimately they would like to see the state funding a majority of the local school budgets. It's a whole other can of worms we'll dive into in another episode of this series. But in 2024, 70 of the 172, which is about 40% of the public school districts in New Hampshire, had special education expenditures that exceed 25% of their total budget. And they've got a whole table that lists what it is. And it's 46% in Brentwood, 42% in Benton. Tamworth is 37%. The Monadnock School District, Regional District, which is big, they have it at 34% of their budget is just special education. So I really would like to dive into what individual education programs, whether they honestly are effective. I have not seen any data to show that these are more effective at a more holistic level. They may be great for some individual students, but we also can't there's legitimate concerns parents have, like myself, where if you just put everyone all in one class and you don't take into consideration that some students are going to learn a lot slower than others, that causes a big issue where you're not only boring the kids that are don't want to be there anyways and are not really either because of whatever education learning issues they may have, social emotional issues they may have, but also they may not necessarily care that much about school. They're going to drag down the whole class, and now the more advanced students that could definitely be jumping way ahead or being held back from being able to learn everything they could be learning at their current school year and be able to ultimately increase the scores of the school on average because of that. When I went to high school especially, it was split up. Like you had the more remedial class, you had the middle of the road class, and you have an honors class. I would love to see that at maybe not K through 3, but you start getting in 4th grade where you got to start learning history and math and civics and all this stuff. There are some kids that definitely need to be a step above that aren't necessarily in a gifted and talented level class, but they're smart enough to be able to pick things up quickly and don't need to be held back by students that honestly are struggling. We should be making sure that they're able to learn. Sometimes that does involve an ed tech that is dedicated to that student. But do we need it at this level where we're literally spending millions of dollars per school district to such a huge extreme? I can understand maybe a Concord, your Manchester. Yeah, it'd probably be in the millions, but Brentwood, Tamworth, it spent $3.3 million. That's huge. They have an $8 million operating budget, $8.7 million operating budget. That's tremendous. That eats into the property taxes that everyone's paying into. So at the more holistic funding level, which is not going to be the focus of this, I really want to get into specifically what's going on with the funding, but the thing is, all you lefties out there that want it more equally distributed across the school districts, those who hate the ideas of EFAs and such, you got to keep in mind the more money that the state is distributing to the various school districts versus having the local control aspect, the state's going to demand more and more. It's going to be more regulation. It's going to be more control over programming. Hey, you Democrats, do you want the Republicans having more say of what's going on in your local school districts? The more you open up the loss of local control, because funding always comes with earmarks and demands, you got to plan accordingly with that. I do not want, personally, what's happening in Concord to have too much of an impact on what's going on with the local school district. This is not an easy thing to talk about no matter what. This is a third rail issue, 100%. There's a reason why the Education Freedom Account program has been so polarizing to politicians on the left. Not necessarily Democrat voters, per se, but politically is very unpopular because they want public schools to be the be-all, end-all when it comes to education here in the state for K through 12. That is not how a majority of voters feel. They want there to be options. It really comes down to what each family wants to have their kid learn, whether it's a more religious-oriented education, a more career-focused education, or more the traditional liberal arts-oriented education that we should be getting in the K through 12 public school system. This is really, I'm hoping, opening a can of worms of different things that livens the debate. Technology, what are the charter schools doing, what's going on with teacher funding, and especially, of course, special education. That needs to be an important thing that's focused on at all levels of debate. And not only are we providing enough money for it, but what does it mean that we're giving this money? What is this money being spent on, and are the outcomes warranting the amount of money that we're spending? Because I have some serious concerns over it, seeing these dramatic amounts of public school funding that's being put towards it. If like 40% of public school districts has special education expenditures that exceeded 25% of their total budget. That's tremendous. Does the data back that? It's been happening long enough now where we should be able to see something, and I don't see anyone talking about it. That's a problem. We need to look into it. NewEnglandTake.com. Please be sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to be starting a new playlist on the channel that's specific for this series. I'm No guarantees on when each of these episodes are going to come out. When I originally started looking into it, I said, I'll find some threads to follow that are straightforward. There are no straightforward threads when it comes to this. This is a dumpster fire of all sorts of topics, just mashed together, and no one talks about the individual aspects, only this per pupil number that doesn't mean anything at all. It's useless. Why is it that the data is only showing this? Either you see these confusing Department of Education and national level statistics of reading comprehension and things like that, but the numbers don't show that spending $44,000 per student is increasing that. Increasing the amount we're paying per teacher is not increasing the scores at all. But when someone goes to a private or charter school, which costs tremendously less, the stats stay the same, but the happiness of the family with what they're receiving goes up. It's going to be messy. Let's start diving into it. If you have any tips on any of this, please email aj@newenglandtake.com. Shoot me a DM on X or any of the social medias. I follow all those. And I'm looking for anyone that's in the systems and really wants to open it up. I'll keep you anonymous. If you want to join the show, we can have you join the show. But I think we need to open this can of worms and see what's wiggling around and see if there's some things we may need to toss aside, or maybe this is the way it has to go, and we need to figure out how to be more economical on it. All right. Once again, newenglandtake.com. Like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.